The following program is rated T for teen for the use of tools and materials that can be harmful to unsupervised usage. Viewer discretion is advised. Oh, and for some homegrown gangster stuff.
Hello everyone, Mr. Waugh here for Mr. Waugh Media. Yes, that is my actual name, yada yada yada. On today's episode, Necromunda. Necromunda. What a dump! I mean, you've got drugs, you've got violence, you've got prostitution, you've got all these other things. It's kind of like Vancouver without the mutants. And on today's episode, I will show you how to build hab units, pipes, and catwalks. Let's get started.
To begin this process, you must first...
Oh, man. Oh, I gotta stop smoking death sticks so much. Anyway, let's get to construction. To begin with, we're going to start marking out our template for this project. I'm going to use 4 inches wide by 6 inches long for my roof, and therefore the wall segments will be, obviously, 6 inches long, and about 3 inches tall should do it. I find this is a good size for most 28mm, which is the standard for most tabletop war games these days, but you can scale this to 15 or even the 6mm scale for stuff like Epic 40K, for example. Now that we have our long panels for the walls finished, we need to do the front and back respectively. So these are obviously going to be 3 inches tall, just like the other ones. And for width, it's going to be just under 4 inches wide, obviously because these are going to be sandwiched between the other 2 wall panels. On average, it's probably going to be closer to about 3.7, taking into consideration the thickness of the styrofoam sheets themselves. Now that we have all the pieces, it's time for assembly. We're going to glue the long walls into place first, and I'm using the hot glue gun obviously, it's usually my go-to, but you can easily use crazy glue if you want, or the white glue as well. Now I discovered here that my measurements weren't quite precise. I went about 3.85 instead of 3.75, so I just got to shave off a little bit there, which now slots in nicely. And when I'm using the hot glue gun, just be mindful of those spider threads, some people call them, little globs that come out the end, and just try to clean up as nice as possible. I'll have to do the same to the other side as well, so I'm just going to shave off a tiny bit so it slots in nicely like so, and we're just going to hot glue it all firmly into place. With that said and done, we're now finished our box template, and we're just going to build off of this thing and go from there. For the next step, we're going to take our cereal box and carefully cut strips out that are 1/2 centimeter wide. At this point, you're probably going to want about a dozen to maybe 16 strips depending on how big of a template that you made. Once we have them, we're going to start gluing them into place, and it's going to be a frame around each side. Now, I apologize in advance, I didn't realize that I didn't have the box fully in focus here. This is what happens when Mia's not around and in charge. This is why she gets paid the big YouTube dollars, yes. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe this video so she can get paid. Paid. What is that word? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be narrating here. Right. So anyway, you're going to be doing this for the next few minutes, and you're going to glue these strips on every side to make it look pretty. Now, try to get them as close as possible to the other ones. Nothing's more awkward than having a giant gaping hole between the 2 panels. So in that regard, you might want to use the white glue. That way you have time to manipulate it and work it into position. For me, I'm bold, I'm brave, I'm going all out. This is probably why I don't get paid the big YouTube dollars like Mia does. But anyway, here's our box with a nice framing around each side. It's really coming together. Next up, we're going to work on these little homemade window panels. They're going to be 2 inches by 2 inches square on the thin cardboard sheets. I'll start making a little stack pile of them here. As for the window piece itself, we're going to take this wavy cardboard and cut it out 1.5 by 1.5 inch square. I'll make a small stockpile of these, and depending on how big your building is, you might need maybe 3, 1 for each side, or you might need dozens if you're doing a larger scale building. Look kind of like shreddies, except they don't taste as good. Now we're going to take our little cardboard panels here and chop off the corners. Not quite enough to make it a perfect octagon, but close. Then we're going to use the hot glue gun and mount the little shreddy into the middle of the panel. Now repeat the process for as many windows as you need, and we'll go from there. For the next step, we're going to take our strips of cardboard that we've previously harvested and start gluing them into place around the sides of the shreddies to make a full frame. In this case, I'm going to start using the super glue instead of the hot glue gun. That way I have a little bit more time to control it, and it's also going to make a very solid bond as well. And with all 4 pieces glued firmly into place, we now have a finished window panel. And I really like these pieces. They're simple, they're quick and easy, and the beauty is they're universal. You could use this in almost any setting you'd like. Next up, we're going to tackle the door, which is almost identical to the window, except it's going to be, taller. It's going to be 2.5 inches, and we're only going to cut the top corners off the frame. Once we have this all cut out, we're going to mount this double shreddy here into place. Maybe I should eat something. Well, this talk of food is making me hungry. And we're just going to take the rest of our strips here and cut them into place. Now, depending on how big of a building you're creating here, you can have a lot of fun with these doors. You can make it into a garage or a double garage, or if you're working in a different scale, for example, maybe 15 millimeters, enough to make a civilian fit through the door, or you could have it into a giant bay that can hold a mech. Once we have all the pieces fully assembled, it's time to start mounting them to the wall itself. Now, for me, I'm going to use the hot glue gun and try to get them as dead center as I can. But if you want to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room, you might want to go with the white glue. That way you have more time to manipulate the object. And with all 4 glued firmly into place, we now have a very solid building to work with. And so far, we've only spent about maybe half an hour on this. In fact, the biggest time sink? Gathering materials and cutting them to the right portions. Next up, we're going to work on the rooftops, and this is a material that I haven't actually shown before in any of my videos, but is one of the most common elements in any of my science fiction builds, and this is a screen door. I went down to my local hardware store and spent about $15 to get a massive roll, enough to, fill a screen door with. And for this one, we're going to cut it out 6 inches by 4 inches to mount it on the roof. Now we're going to have to shave off the sides about, I want to say ½ centimeter to fit in with what the frame is. Now this will take me a couple of tries here, as you can see, because I want to make it nice and snug and precise. So go slow, make your cuts clean and precise, and eventually it's going to fit in there nice and neat. Once the screen is mounted firmly into place with your choice of glue, you now have a finished building. It's quick, it's simple and easy, and with this, you can build whatever kind of structure you'd like. Here's a piece that I made that's a little bit longer, has a couple more window panels, and is obviously 8-sided. This is a really cool sort of sci-fi hab unit, and again, only took half an hour to build. The next piece that we're going to build is an industrial catwalk, and mine is going to be about 2.5 inches wide by 6 inches long. Now this is strong enough to support most miniatures, but if you want to make it a little bit longer or a little bit wider to have larger scale miniatures or maybe some pewter guys on there, just make sure you mount some cardboard underneath just to give it a little bit more structural integrity. Next up, we're going to take some cardboard here and slice it into strips. I ran out earlier, so I got to make a fresh batch. And we're going to glue these to the side of the plank. Now, someone recently asked me, what happens if I don't have access to styrofoam? Can I still build the things in your tutorial? And the answer is, absolutely. Instead of using styrofoam, you could use just a regular cardboard box and just chop it up. Now, the only problem with that is you can obviously see the inside and it's kind of ugly. And that's why these side panels will be really useful. It's going to cover all of that up. And even in a pinch, if you don't have access for whatever reason to styrofoam or cardboard, you could even use some thicker balsa wood. Just make sure you cut it clean so there's no splinters hanging out and so that your frame is on there tight. Once we have all 4 sides completed, we're going to start working on the top piece with the screen door. Now, for mine, it's 2.5 inches by 6 inches. Like I said previously, I'll try to cut that as close as I can and then start working my way inward, slicing off little pieces as I go. Now at this point, you have a creative choice to decide on. Do you want the frame to go all the way around, just on the sides, or just on the end cap? Now, when you're making your cuts, you're going to need to take that into account. But once you've narrowed it down and made your choice, we're going to mount it into place with the glue. Now, I used white glue in the middle to hold most of the netting down, but along the frame, there's a thick layer of super glue just to make sure that it's held firmly down. And once that's glued into place, I'm going to start working on the frame once again. Now I decided I'm going to do all 4 sides and mount them into place with the hot glue gun. Now, sometimes the cardboard is going to encroach onto where the screen door is, and don't worry about it too much. It's not that much of an elevation difference that it'll be noticeable. Now, if you're a stickler, you can go in with a knife and carefully shave it away. Some of you might be like, no big deal. Totally up to you. And with that, we are now finished our catwalk. It was quick, easy, took only a handful of minutes to make, and can be used in a variety of different ways. With assembly now out of the way, we're going to get into the painting segment. Like always, we're going to prime the entire model with some acrylic black paint and slather it all over there. Yes, get it in everywhere. All the nooks and crannies, look at it go. Insert paint drying joke here? Question mark? Alright, you know the drill. Just cover the entire thing in black and give it lots of time to dry. Once that's out of the way, we're going to take 2 parts black to 1 part white to make a darker gray color, and we're going to slap that across the entire surface. Now, you'll notice that I'm changing the way that my brush is hitting the cardboard. I want to make it a little bit more randomized. There's going to be a little bit of black left in some places, others might get a little bit more gray than others. The reason behind this is if we do this with multiple shades of gray, it's going to add an interesting kind of concrete, stone-esque kind of look to it. It's a lot of trial and error. You'll just sort of get used to it the more you experiment with this thing. But in the end, if done properly, it can turn out really well. So we're just going to slap this across all the surfaces and go from there. For our next coat, we're going to use 1 part black and 1 part white to make a medium gray color, and we're going to slap that across the entire surface. Now, if you're familiar with my previous videos, you know I tend to go from dark to light in both color and in my brush strokes as well. Usually the first couple layers are a little bit thicker with the paint until gradually, when I'm working with basically pure white, I'm using a light dusting across the surface. Same in this video, same as before. For this final coat, we're going to take what's pretty much just pure white and a tiny drop of black and dust it across the entire surface. At this point, you'll really notice this whole stone concrete effect that we're working with. And just have fun with it. Let's be real, it's going to be trial and error. Maybe get some spare cardboard and start practicing and come up with the technique that you think looks best. Next up, we're going to work on the metallic areas. So for this one, I'm going to use a generic gunmetal color here. For Citadel, it's called Lead Belchers. Vallejo and Army Painter also have some pretty good ones as well. And we're just going to use it on the raised areas, all the ridges on the doors. Try not to get in the cracks, but if you do, not to worry, we'll be washing everything later on, which will darken those areas. Now I'm just going to switch tools here, go from my smaller brush to something a little bit bigger. That way it doesn't take me eons to do the entire roof panel here. And once that's done, I'm going to take the brush, which by this point should have very little paint left in the bristles, and lightly brush it across all the different wall panels, especially along the edges. This is going to give it kind of a neat, weather-worn effect, maybe some battle damage in there, just to add a little interesting bits to the surface. And with that done, we're now finished our basic structure. We got some cool textures in there with the stone/concrete effect. We got the metals. From here, we could add accessories. We could maybe do some graffiti on there. Or maybe something like hazard chevrons. You know what? Let's do some hazard chevrons. So first up, we're going to use a strip of white along any surface you want those bright yellow and black hazard chevrons to be. Now I know what you're probably thinking, but wait, in the last episode, white and yellow, insert here for it link, he went from black into his lighter colors. This is hypocrisy, this is heresy. Now, put down the pitchforks, put down the torches. There's a method to my madness. You see, if I'm working with a three-dimensional object, I need there to be natural shadows underneath. Now, if I'm working with black into lighter colors, that's going to naturally, gradually build up to those colors. With this, because it is a flat, two-dimensional surface, we don't need to worry about shadows, and in fact, we want it to be as bright as possible. So, in this case, we've put down our base coat of a white, and then we're going to use a golden yellow on top of it. And I'll probably do about 2 coats just to make it really pop out here. Now, in my defense, you could use the previous episode's tutorial to really bring these chevrons to life. However, because it's going to be covered in black stripes for about 50% of the surface, a lot of that extra effort is kind of wasted in the operation. But that's totally up to you how clean you want it to look. From there, we're going to take a very fine pen and we're going to draw some diagonal lines. Now, to be fair here, I'm trying to aim it towards the camera and I'm not looking directly at it, so my lines aren't going to be 100% clean, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to do here. And besides, unlike me, you guys have all the time in the world to get them as straight as you like. Because, I have to make a deadline. The things I do for you people.
Hey, you can't say that kind of thing!
Oh God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry, Don Cherry. After using politically incorrect terminology and being banished from Canada onto a small iceberg, I'm now gonna have to show you guys. After being forcefully removed from my iceberg onto a small dinghy in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean for misgendering half of my audience, we're now going to try and continue with these chevrons. First off, you're going to water down some black. After having my dinghy sunk in the middle of the ocean by the Canadian Coast Guard for using racist terminologies, I am now going to try and finish filming this from the back of a floating log. Well, just take that color and paint it in between the lines that we previously sketched in there with the pen. Now I'm going to try to do the same here on the tiny building. Again, this is a very awkward angle, trying to aim into the camera, but I will give it the old college try here. And yeah, from there, you have this. Voila. Overall, a relatively simple technique. The biggest part is going to be your brush technique and your penmanship. Once all the paint is fully dried, we're going to go in with a coat of Agrax Earthshade. If you don't have this, you can make your own wash using a mixture of black and brown colors and heavily dilute them down with some water. Just cover the entire surface to give it that darker, gritty look. Now, you also might want to focus around the edges, along the roof area especially, and have it dripping down, depending on how thick you lay it in there. This can give some really cool rust effects and grime, and this is another technique. It's more trial and error and just sort of picking and choosing what you like. And once that's all dried, we are finished our basic structure. I really like the hazard chevrons and that dark, grimy, industrial look to it, and because it's a simple technique, you can apply it to all the different pieces to have a uniform, coherent look. Now you might be asking, what about accessories? How about this one right here? So this is cardboard from the inner core of a packing tape roll, and it's just mounted on a couple pieces of cardboard with all the edges fully done. We've got a little bit of screen door on the front there, and some hazard chevrons across the top. Quick, simple, and easy. Or how about this one here, a garage piece that clips to the side of a building. This entire thing was made out of cardboard and cereal box. We've got that same door as before, a little ramp that leads up into it, and I even got some industrial pipe that was only $1 a piece from the local hardware store. Now I like these, but let's go for something a little bit more complicated now. I like this one. Look at that. Now this is an ingenious work. I don't know how I came up with it really, but the whole idea is it's a freestanding piece of terrain that just clips to the side of a building. Look at this. Sometimes I amaze even myself. Alright, what else do I got in my bag of tricks here? Well, how about this one here, a freestanding piece of scenery. So this is simple. It was made out of some debit rolls that were stacked one on top of each other, like you would kind of see on a construction site. And this is a nice, simple, line-of-sight blocking piece of terrain. And you're probably thinking, come on, where are the big ones? Alright, here you go. So the inner core is made from a paper towel roll, and I sandwiched it between two pieces of Catwalk. And on the end pieces there, some simple styrofoam blocking it all in place. The top's got a little bit of the screen door as well, just to tie it all together. Simple, quick, easy. But wait, there's more. How about a stripper sign? Alright, so the base is made out of some generic styrofoam, and it's got that layer of screen door on top to give it the cool texture. The back pieces were some industrial plastics that I had from another model kit, and the lady herself, I found an image online, printed it out, and I carefully traced it onto some cardboard and took a thin X-Acto blade, carving it out. Next up, we have a little freestanding power generator that was actually from an RV part, back when I worked in the auto industry. So this was looted from one of the scrap yards, and I just thought it looked kind of cool. You never know what you can find when you look. Next up is another constructed piece, and this one clips to the side of the building. This is just some simple cardboard that I put together into a square box. Even got one of those little shreddies on there. A couple of these hollow tubes along the edge for some industrial barrels. The one in the middle is actually hollowed out to have an LED light in it. And along the edge, we've got that chicken wire holding it in place. That was a couple dollars at the hardware store. Like I said, originally this was meant to clip to the side of the building, like so, although you could use it as a freestanding piece of scenery, I guess. But the whole idea was you clip it to the side, and it's kind of like a loading bay for one of these industrial areas. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, look. It's done. Okay, so I apologize for that last bit there. I thought it was just hilarious in the editing process, and I had to throw it in there somewhere. But we are done the entire HAB unit, and all these accessories really bring it to life. And it's kind of cool because it's got such a simple paint scheme with the chevrons and that grimy industrial look. It ties all the elements together, even though they're all separate pieces. It's just that coherent look. And this is a really simple, it took about an hour to do overall, and I hope that you guys were inspired by this one. And the best part is, this is just the beginning. Do you guys want to see more? All right.
Hey yo, it's BJ Kush Money with my homie, Yo Little Thuggin, and Mr. War from Money Shit Records. You show 'em how we represent the streets.
Yo, I'm a gangster.
No, you just sounding the same, man. Aren't you sick of spitting lies?
Now we're repping the game, oh yeah. We be rocking the club.
You ain't even a gangster.
I am too.
Good lord. Now let's be honest, I'm getting so exhausted of all your fake MCs.
What, you were fucking awesome.
Copy top 40, ever tried just to spit some facts?
I'm a true born hustler, got my blow in my gas. Yeah, stashes of cash, I'm only 19. I live in Pleasantville, I'm a pimp with a dream.
Kid, slow down, you ain't owning the curb. You work at Walmart and you live in the suburbs.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm truly hardcore, homie. Street soldier for life, yo, ain't you heard?
What the hell, man? That shit, it didn't even rhyme.
It doesn't even have to. Grocery bag.
What makes you think that you're a gangster?
Stole a low ride, I'm a homie saying bang
Hey
it.
kid, the whip that you claim that you snatched, isn't that your mom's car?
She makes me sit in the back.
What's this about riding and stomp a dude in the town?
He said that I was whack, so shit has gotta go down.
Well, what'd he say?
I'm a fake white wankster.
You don't think that he's right?
Hell no, bitch, I'm a gangster. Yo, I'm a gangster.
No, you just sounding the same, man. Aren't you sick of spitting lies?
Now we're repping the game, oh yeah. We be rocking the club.
You ain't even a gangster.
I am too. I am too. I am too. Gangster.
Well, that's been today's episode. I hope that you were entertained. If you were, make sure that you hit the like, the share, subscribe down below, and please pass this around to all your friends. And if there's anything you want me to build in an upcoming episode, put it down in the comments down below, and maybe we'll get around to it in an upcoming episode. On that note, I have been Mr. War from Necromunda. I'll catch you later.
Am I here for a reason? Sometimes I wonder why. Am I here for a reason? Or is life just passing by? Someone please tell me.